This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
10 years ago, the Belt and Road Initiative was proposed to bring fresh momentum of growth. Bridging more than 152 countries across Eurasia, Africa, and Latin America. Can the BRI overcome geopolitical challenges to uplift cooperation among nations? Will it succeed in its mission to deliver a brighter future for all? Seeking a shared community with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Hello and welcome to CGTN's special program on the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm Zheng Shi.
And I'm Li Qiuyuan. Thank you so much for joining us. 2023 marks the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. To mark the date, CGTN has co-produced a series of programs with national media networks from Pakistan, Malaysia, Serbia, and Indonesia to explore the outcomes of bilateral cooperation under the Belt and Road framework.
And in the first session of our special program, we discussed the outcome of the initiative over the past decade and the challenges it has faced. In this session, we'll discuss the expansion and upgrade of the Belt and Road Initiative. Here in the studio, I'm now joined by Amin Hamadi, Chief Analyst for the African Chamber of Commerce, Zun Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow from the CCG and the BRI Strategic Institute of Tsinghua University, Harvey Zodin, Senior Fellow of the Center for China and Globalization, also Zhang Gong, Professor of University of International Business and Economics. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. The Belt and Road Initiative has aimed to create various kinds of connections between Asia, Africa, and Europe. Central and Eastern Europe is an important region for land connections within the BRI, with major cargo links by rail between the EU and Asia. Serbia, one of the first countries to join the BRI, shares an in-court friendship with China and has set a good example of China's CEEC cooperation. Serbia's national broadcaster RTS explores what the initiative has achieved over the past decade.
Our guests at the studio, Dr. Jovan Chavoski, sinologist at the Institute for Recent History, and Mr. Bojan Lalic, director of the Belt and Road Institute in Belgrade, will talk about the progress made by these two countries in the field of cooperation and mutual connectivity. Welcome. Mr. Lalic, how would you assess the biggest economic successes of cooperation between China and Serbia? I am sure that the biggest economic successes are yet to come. A precondition for multilateral and bilateral cooperation is that a country has its agenda, that it has its own path and a desire where it wants to position itself. Serbia has made its path, its agenda. It's the only country in the region that has 4 scientific and technological parks and many business incubators. Serbia wants to be recognized as a country of high tech and innovations. It's important that people between these areas need to communicate. We are now at a level of constructing this infrastructure. The Chinese say when you want to do any job, a business, you first need to construct a road. Now we're constructing roads. Up until recently, our roads were very modest. Mr. Chavoski, the 3-day visit of President Xi Jinping to Serbia in 2016 provided momentum both to political and economic projects and to the scientific and cultural cooperation, tourism, and connectivity between our two nations. Of all the projects, which would you single out as the key to our mutual interest as a sinologist and as a scientific worker? Yes, as you said, this visit was extremely important because it was the visit of a first Chinese head of state after 30 years. So this really did create a favorable political ambience to further develop cooperation, and it was a culmination of a process of building good political relations on a bilateral level starting with 2009, when we signed the agreement on strategic partnership. It is extremely important to create a good political ambience with China that will then give rise to all other positive results in mutual cooperation. Of course, after the political level, this cooperation was shifted to the economic plan, and those are the projects that you and Mr. Lalic mentioned. At the same time, interpersonal contacts, which is something very important for me as a scientist and an educational worker, are really booming. When I was in China, when I was doing my PhD there, the connectivity wasn't as intense and the exchange was very rare. But now, the people from China who want to learn about Serbia and ex-Yugoslavia, about its history, politics, and economic, people are coming here more and more from China to study here, to learn, to study the territory here and all its segments. And what is also very important is that tourism exchange has been on the increase, especially when we abolished the visa regime. And this really helped to enrich and expand the context, interpersonal context. Now many Chinese tourists come here who visited Serbia before the COVID pandemic, and now this number is also on the increase again, and I hope to attain the levels from before 2019 and even to overcome it. And this is also very important because people of Serbia get to know the people of China, they get to know about China, its politics, its presence here, and Chinese get a better understanding of the people in Serbia, and they have very positive impressions of our country and of our people, and they become friends of Serbia in different spheres of life and on all levels, from the highest where the heads of states are to the lowest interpersonal level where common people just talk to each other. This entire initiative has provided on this bilateral level a huge incentive, and I hope that it will continue in the future. Dr. Chavoshki, international circumstances and the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war as well have somewhat slowed down the general implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Baltic countries, for instance, have withdrawn from the 16+1 initiative, China's cooperation with countries in Central and East Europe. How would you assess the dynamics in implementing the set objectives of the Belt and Road Initiative, and is it gradually getting back on track? Yes, as you said, the pandemic and the geopolitical crisis and the conflict in Ukraine have caused a turmoil in the dynamics of future plans. The projects that have already been in motion by China through this entire initiative with different countries, I believe that they will continue in each of the individual countries, and I'm sure that they will be completed successfully. Of course, further projects in the future will depend on China and on everything that will take place in its environment. After China was completely closed and shut down during the pandemic, it strives to get back on its pre-pandemic level as fast as possible, to consolidate itself economically, to have this huge economic and political momentum in the world again. And at the same time, it will all depend on the situation that will be in the immediate Chinese surrounding and as well as in Europe. What we shouldn't forget about the Belt and Road Initiative is the idea to connect the European Union with the end east of Eurasia, of course personified in the People's Republic of China, but the question remains of the development of the European and Chinese relations in light of the conflict in Ukraine, where the European Union has become the belligerent party in this conflict, and China stays aside and is a peacemaker, a country that keeps open channels with all the participants involved in the crisis. So we will see how this will develop on the level of the European Union and member states in the member states of the European and also other countries in Europe, including ourselves. As you said, the Baltic countries, Lithuania has withdrawn, and the other two are very reserved. We will see the relations relations between China, Russia, the United States, the crisis, how will this reflect on the initiative, on the certain countries in Central and Eastern Europe? But all in all, China wants to continue to develop this initiative, and it will continue to invest economic, political, financial, and other resources. I believe that individual countries will continue to cooperate with China on this agenda. Serbia will stay on its path of good bilateral cooperation with the People's Republic of China. Of course, in the wider European environment, it remains to be seen how this will reflect on it, but I believe that the Chinese Belt and Road policy will be now the primary importance for Chinese political and economic safety.
All right, and my first question goes to Professor Gong here. We know Central and Eastern Europe is a vital hub for European connectivity. In your opinion, Professor, how important it is to incorporate this region into the blueprint of the Belt and Road Initiative?
It's a very important piece. As a matter of fact, I've been to Belgrade before, so I know Serbia, very well. The Serbian people welcome Chinese investors. They're very friendly to people from China, and I think the cooperation between China and that region is in the context of the historical context, that there really hasn't been a lot of trade and business relationships between this area and China in the past, but now it's starting to change. One reason, of course, is the railway I just mentioned earlier. Another thing I think is also potentially contributing to a lot to more development of the relationship between the two sides is the port project in Greece, the Pararia project, which eventually they will build a railway from that port city all the way to Hungary's capital, Budapest. The section between Budapest and Belgrade is already under construction. I think it's not far away from opening up for operation. And then, in addition to this, there are also a lot of investment from Chinese companies in Serbia. Serbia's access to the European Union market is actually quite favorable, even though Serbia is not an EU member. So I think we have a mechanism in place, China 16+1 dialogue mechanism, I think. It's between China and what's called the CEEC countries. And I think China's economic relationship with Europe, particularly that region, Central and East European countries, has a lot of potential. Russia has a different opinion on this, but this is something that we have to deal with. But overall, I think the countries, at least as far as Serbia is concerned, they view the Belt and Road Initiative in a very bright light.
And by including countries like Serbia and other countries in Central and Middle East European countries, the Belt and Road Initiative is really fostering an economic network through 6 corridors zoomed, right, stretching away from China. How are you looking at it and the strategic thinking behind it?
Well, firstly, I really have to agree with Professor Gong when he says there is a historic precedent for this kind of cooperation and connectivity. Even that we are calling it the Silk Road, there is millennia of history behind cooperation, mutual understanding, cultural connectivity in these regions that today make up the Belt and Road Initiative and the 6 corridors. So I think before we think about the broader geostrategic aspect, the fact is that every country along these corridors, people along these corridors are looking for better opportunities. You go to a country like Pakistan or Serbia and you ask them, okay, what is your domestic development plan? What do you ideally want to be able to achieve within your region? Because we all exist in a broader context. And they would definitely say, yes, it would be great to have a railway line connecting us with countries in the region. It would be great to have better opportunities for our people and better access to, beyond our borders. And I think that is the innate logic behind these corridors as well. What essentially we're looking at is connectivity. But this also takes me to that concept in the Shanghai spirit, which is about, mutual understanding, people-to-people exchanges, create a business environment that is conducive to better understanding and respect for one another, and then we create synergy as regions. And that is where, if we really look at China's vision for the Belt and Road Initiative, which is inspired by the Silk Road, a history of cooperation, between these regions. It is motivated by this idea that we will create a better world together. Countries can be better off together. And we can all learn from each other.
You know, the BRI has also fostered synergies with several other countries' national initiatives or national strategies, such as Kazakhstan's Bright Road Initiative and EU's Juncker Plan, as well as Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum. So, Amin, to you, how are you looking at the effectiveness of creating such synergetic relations?
Well, I think starting point to talk about projects in Kazakhstan or in Malaysia shows the loyal benefits of the Silk Road, because it started with the land through Kazakhstan to Middle Asia till Europe, and then if you come from the sea, definitely you have to come out through Malaysia. And then the good thing about the BRI is that it can be divided into sub-projects or sub-initiatives with every different region with what they need. Earlier, Zoom has mentioned that when there are discussions between China and other countries or any other region, when they are asked what would you like to have, what are the developments you are needed, so that you can develop your economy differently. So I believe that the infrastructure built in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, is not the same done in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in Egypt, or even in South Africa. So definitely these sub-projects can always help to make the clear picture about what China, or like also Professor Arvis mentioned, that it's not a Chinese project, it's actually all the countries or all the members that actually adhere in this philosophy or this vision to be benefiting from the Belt Road Initiative.
Thank you, everyone. Why don't we turn to our audience to see where their thoughts lie with this topic. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We would appreciate it if you would kindly let us know where you're from and who you intend for your question to go to. Please. Who wants to go first? All right, that lady in the middle.
Well, thank you so much for all the great discussions. I have a question for Mr. Hamadi. You're from Africa. So I was wondering if you can nail one area of cooperation in the next 10 years for China to be chiming in the continent. Thank you.
Well, that's a very good question. I think what's lacking more in Africa is more connectivity. There are a lot of regions in Africa that are still missing electricity, that's still missing water, especially internet. Now, internet in our studies, in our work, it's something that is very important. And then we know how important is the Chinese infrastructure in terms of internet, in terms of connectivity, is so huge and large in Africa. And we hope that it's going to be more and more in. Not only that, but actually in vocational trainings or human capital development. This is a region where Africa also wish to have more cooperation with China.
I may add one footnote to this. When it comes to Africa, it is a very interesting phenomenon in that there's actually a lot of trade between African countries and outside the world. But the intra-Africa trade, the trade between countries in Africa, for example, between your country, north of Sahara to the sub-Sahara region, is lacking. The trade between English-speaking Eastern Africa and French-speaking Western Africa is missing, is lacking.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of potential for building the kind of connectivities that would facilitate intra-Africa trade. And go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Africa is a large continent, and with the diversity that exists, there are some regional blocks between like East Africa or West Africa. So definitely any infrastructure, if we're talking about BRI, that definitely can help the trade between the countries and develop more economic potential there.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, anyone else?
Anyone else?
Have something to share? Yes.
Hello everyone, I'm a student from Beijing Language and Culture University. I want to raise a question. There exists some words, or you can say some media, saying that as long as you join us, we will give you money, the technology, the skills, etc. We make our effort to help you to do almost everything you want. Well, you cannot describe us in such a simple way, in my opinion. From my perspective, it does not make sense, and it's a little weird or ridiculous. So at the same time, I wonder every professor's opinion or how do you like or how do you feel about these words?
if you're with us or against us kind of words?
There exist some words that they simply describe BRI as if you join us, our China, we together, we will give you the money, give you almost everything you want. It's just weird.
Yeah. Can I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Zoom.
I think one of the we are also as we celebrate 10 years, we're also talking about the learning curve, right? For both China and developing countries, Belt and Road countries, what have we learned? And I think your words, the statement you made is very important because at times there have been cases where partner countries under the BRI have assumed that just because now we have signed the Belt and Road Cooperation Agreement, the success of these projects is inevitable. But actually, there is a lot of hard work. It is competitive. The countries, developing countries, need to learn also from China's own experience, and they need to study themselves to be able to make that intention successful. So I think if I understand your statement correctly, what you're saying is that just because people sign the Belt and Road Agreement and agree to work with China under the Belt and Road, that does not mean there's success is inevitable. It also doesn't mean that the onus of making Belt and Road projects successful lies on China or the governments or the companies from China, but actually it's going to be a mutual effort. So I think that is something increasingly we need to emphasize, that it's going to be constant hard work, constant receptivity. Also study China's years, decades of reform and opening up. It is a story of a lot of successes and also learning. So this is one thing that I totally agree with you. We cannot take it for granted. Intention is not the only factor. It needs to be constant hard work.
It's intended to be mutually beneficial,
Yeah.
but certainly not failure-proof.
And
when
be
you
proactive.
sign on.
We need to be proactive as partner countries. What do you want?
This is a narrative that is very troublesome to me. You know, the narrative that BRI is for China, by China, of China. This is not right. I mean, this is, you know, these projects are based on equal negotiation, signed by both parties. BRI is not a philanthropic project. It's fundamentally it's an economically driven, mutually beneficial commercial projects for the most part. Of course, you know, we offer very favorable terms for making loans. But at the end of the day, the economics has to be kicking in. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. China is not in the business of spreading money around and doing another round of Marshall Plan. No, it's not like that. So I think, you know, this narrative, whoever promoted this or invented this, it's not a very good, you know, well-intentioned effort. It should be rejected.
A sense of ownership. Developing countries should have a sense of ownership and trust that you have an important role to play in the development of your own country.
All right, thank you very much.
I think that's all we said about the true core of our BRI.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. And now we want to head into one more segment of our special program today. After years of Belt and Road cooperation, we're not only seeing an expansion of BRI partners, but also an upgrade of cooperation. As President Xi Jinping said at the first Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation, the initiative is evolving into a road of science and technology that's benefiting more and more people along the road. Indonesia now has Southeast Asia's first bullet train, the Jakarta-Bangdan high-speed railway, stretching 142 kilometers on Java Island, with a maximum speed of 350 kilometers per hour. The flagship Belt and Road project is the first overseas high-speed railway made completely with Chinese railway systems, technology, and industrial components. Indonesia's national broadcaster TVRI World elaborates on the significance of the high-speed rail for both nations.
Hi, I'm Siska Becker, greeting you from Jakarta for TVRI World's special dialogue in collaboration with CGTN. Let me start my conversation by introducing our guest speakers. Today in the studio, we have Fatan Sembiring, the chairman of Indonesia and China Alumni and Cooperation. Hello, welcome.
Hello,
Mas
thank
Fatan.
you for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure. And also we have Ms. Christine Susana Chin, Director of Strategic Communication and Research of Association at Gentala Institute. Hello, Mbak Christine.
Hi, Siska. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
I would love to hear maybe some insights from your colleagues and your fellow alumni. What is the sentiment in China itself about this mega project between Indonesia and China?
Yeah, China is very proud about the technology that they are having, that they are currently exporting to worldwide, especially because China has altered their economic backbone from the manufacturing industry to the service industry. And this service industry not only about providing service itself, but also to put the innovation within the manufactured goods, right? I mean, there has to be pros and cons about this project, high-speed railway project. But if we are seeing it into the brighter minds and then seeing the future of Indonesia, capability of providing its people for better high-speed or better mass transportation methods, I think this is the exact way to learn from the best, right? I mean, seeing the Western companies like the Elon Musk himself, and then the other Western companies that they are trying to introduce the Hyperloop system, but then, hey, where is it? Where's the network of Hyperloop? You know, like from Dubai to wherever they are going, from New York to San Francisco in 3 hours. I mean, come on. I mean, there is this high-speed railway network that China is currently leading. Of course, there are Japan and Korean counterparts, or even German. But then, if we are talking Indonesia and China, this is the exact moment and exact topic that Indonesian engineers can really learn from. And the other thing that should be more interesting for Indonesian engineers or in Indonesian, sort of intellectuals to study more is about learning to be the system providers for electric vehicles, rather than only becoming consumers for the imported electric vehicles. And then, of course, we export the raw materials after the processing. But then if we are talking about the ecosystem of the electric vehicle, Indonesia can also learn from China or from other countries that has the technologies that we can build ourselves for the system, not only the hardware.
That is why transfer of technology has always been an important factor from our government when initiating cooperation with other countries. Now, Ms. Christine, I want to push even more about the topic of the high-speed train between Indonesia and China, because this is so monumental for Indonesia. This is the first high-speed train in Southeast Asia. Do you think this will open up for more possibilities of cooperation, especially in mass transportation between Indonesia and China?
You have to remember as well that this will also be China's first in Southeast Asia. And for China, it's also important because this is a prestige project in a sense that no longer people look at made in China product as this cheap, sort of like
mass
smart,
produced,
durable, and then now it's a high tech, it's green, and it's smart. And we're quite lucky in a sense because we are developing this high-speed train in a moment where the smart technology is already in. So combining that with our thinking about developing smart governance and clean governance in Indonesia, there is definitely potential to pursue here, definitely, because I think it's absurd to think that we're only going to stop with Bandung. The whole idea is to connect Indonesia all over the place, not even just in Java. I mean, who knows, with the development of innovation and technology, not just in China, but probably somewhere else, because China is also, for example, cooperating with Germany in developing their high-speed train technology, Siemens. And so, with the development of innovation and technology and cross-border cooperation, who knows that high-speed train can even cross islands, as our previous president Sukarno has always dreamt about, connecting Indonesia's many beautiful island with sort of like transportations that goes beyond water and air, but also sort of like land. So this is definitely something that we're looking forward to. And there are, of course, a lot of challenges we face with the pandemic, with a lot of the domestic situations as well, and there are a lot of lessons learned from there. So I'm hoping that in the future, when we expand this network, we can always take lessons that we have taken, that we have gone through before, and continue the development in a better and even sort of like speedier momentum for us.
About the Belt Road Initiative campaign by Mr. Xi Jinping, Mas Fatan, maybe you can add about how do you think Indonesia can benefit from this campaign to accelerate Indonesia's development and also the relationship between Indonesia and China?
Yeah, sure. One of which that China is currently offering in terms of this Belt and Road Initiative is the advancement of technology, especially what we are going to see and what we are seeing in high-speed railway networks that already built and then already operated in Jakarta to Bandung and back and forth, right?
Yes.
I mean, one of which that Indonesia still needs to learn from China is that kind of technology that we desperately need, especially in recent days. Jakarta is heavily polluted. You know, the air pollution is quite a discussion.
Yes, it's been one of the major concerns.
So that's why. In these terms, China is, China can be the source for the technology that Indonesia probably needs for a better mass transportation in the future, and one of which is a high-speed railway, and then also for the electric bus that we've also seeing a lot of Chinese manufacturers brands for electric bus in Jakarta.
There you go, our guest speakers, Fatan Sembiring, Chairman of Indonesia-China Alumni and Cooperation, and Ms. Christine Susana Chin, Director of Strategic Communication and Research of Association of Gentala Institute. And that is the end of my conversation with my guest speakers. Thank you so much for all the insights once again, and thank you for joining us.
So as we heard there, both guests there talked about the fresh opportunities the Belt and Road Initiative has brought to the country in terms of technological advancement. So, I mean, how are you looking at the BRI's ability to serve as a platform for technological cooperation or innovative collaboration?
Well, this is another example of how the BRI have been developing in the past decades. I mean, we starting from an infrastructure, maritime, wherever, till a technological exchange or sharing knowledge or knowing even how to manage stuff. Such a railway or such a project in any country can be very profitable and very beneficial. But then it comes to the people to develop it better, to use it in the better way and stuff like that. And just one point to mention that in past like 30 years or 40 years, China has been learning a lot how to develop technology. And now we can see in most universities the level of the Chinese engineers or the Chinese innovative patents that is published on any papers or any research journals. You see that the Chinese are taking really a higher leadership in this major or this domain. So definitely China now has the technology, and definitely China is also willing to share this technology with especially their neighbors. If you see projects in Malaysia, project in Indonesia, here shows how China is really giving initiatives to their partners or their neighbor countries.
Well, pretty much every guest we have today has touched upon the wide and broad scope of cooperation under BRI. If there's one thing that I hope our viewers and audience can take away from watching this show, is that it really goes beyond just infrastructure projects. And Zoom, I want to get you to elaborate on this also, because many people may not know this, but the BRI actually has 5 major priorities: coordinating policies, connecting infrastructure, facilitating trade, integrating finances, and fostering human bonds. How do you feel that they fit together into this grand and ambitious plan?
I'll try as precisely as possible. I think, first of all, if we observe all the 4 interviews in partner countries that we've seen, they revolve around the same theme. They connect the building of infrastructure, firstly with their domestic requirements as necessities. They acknowledge China's expertise in this domain, and then they gradually connect this towards their socioeconomic goals, and then the impact that these developments, this hard infrastructure, can eventually have on people. So if we actually think about China's own domestic development, nobody builds a bridge for the sake of building a bridge. It's really about how that bridge can facilitate a better quality of life for people on either side, right? And when you look at China, the perception about China as well, the woman in this latest interview mentioned that 10 years ago, nobody could have thought about China as the country that's going to change the game for a new pace of life, for a new pace of development. So if we come back to the 5 aspects of the Belt and Road Initiative, which include infrastructure, obviously up until people-to-people connectivity, the purpose of building these infrastructures and avenues for people to exchange and to be able to connect is to improve the quality of life for ordinary people. And I see that happening. China's domestic example is definitely one that countries look up to. And if we think about entire regions like the Southeast Asian region, they're also thinking, okay, once we have this train, once we have these people's, this avenue, we'll be able to, expedite the rest. The Belt and Road Summit that's about to happen is also about bringing partner countries together and thinking about better policies that eventually can improve lives of ordinary people. So I think we see it happening, but it's going to be a process that's already taking place.
A very inclusive plan, but Harvey, do you see any underexplored possibilities, untapped potential when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative?
First, I have to say that seeing is believing. And I've driven from the capital of Indonesia to Bandung, and it was a stop-and-go journey, mostly stop, very little go, and it took a long time. So this train is revolutionary, and everybody should go to Bandung because there's a museum there that details the 1955 Bandung Conference, which was the non-aligned nations from which the global South has grown from. But in terms of the future, I see so much possibilities for Belt and Road to create so many connections between the countries. And it's not one way, it's in multiple directions. So it's going to provide opportunities to know each other, to learn from each other, and also to profit from each other. And so I believe that we're on a road to future success and cooperation like the world hasn't seen except maybe along the ancient Silk Road.
Professor Gong, I really like the fact that you brought up the lack of connectivity on the African continent itself. I mean, some of our audience members also expressed an interest in the development, or a lack of, for that matter, in Africa. We have to face the reality that many of the issues that existed in Africa before the inception of the Belt and Road Initiative are still there today. So when you talk about the Belt and Road Initiative helping to address some of these issues, to maybe alleviate the connectivity issues that you mentioned, what can we really anticipate going into the next chapter?
Okay, so in order to answer your question, I will start by following up the theme you just mentioned. I don't know the audience if you know about the history of this. So you mentioned the Bandung Conference in 1952. This is a landmark conference. This is the first time the developing world, at the time, today we call it Global South, but at the time there are a few developing countries from Asia, also some actually from Africa. I still vividly remember the speech. I wasn't born when that happened. But I vividly still remember the speech I read delivered by Indonesia then President Mr. Sukarno. In the first paragraph, he said that beforehand we had the leaders in the developing world would have to go to Europe. They have to go to America to have a conference to talk about their own affairs. But today we're having this conference in Bandung in Indonesia, and that's. Go back to your question. I think the connectivity issue in Africa. somewhat resonates still, I think, the very famous statement by President Sukarno delivered in that Bandung speech. And I think the Belt and Road Initiative solved a lot of connectivity, transportation problems in Africa, but we're not going to solve all the problems, right? And we're not going to wait until we build like almost 100% full connectivity before we talk about more important, more economically driven issues. At the end of the day, Belt and Road Initiative is all about economics, and I think what Africa desperately needs is industrialization. The continent needs to develop. The continent needs to manufacture things instead of just mining things from the ground or plant things from the ground and just export to the rest of the world. This is not going to make it. And I think it's we need to get into a sort of a cycle of building more infrastructures, more investment from China, more investment from other parts of the world, create more jobs, especially in manufacturing sectors in Africa. I think one of the litmus tests, in my view, for the success of the Belt and Road Initiative is to see whether it spurs more investments that create jobs in these countries, which will feed back to the economy so that the country can afford to have more infrastructures built, just as China did in the 1990s, 2000s, right? That's how our country actually developed. So I think, you've asked me the question, what's the follow-up for the first phase of a Belt and Road Initiative focused pretty much on infrastructure? My answer is very simple. More investment, more trade between China and these countries. It goes both ways. It benefits these countries. And I think the wealthier these countries become, the more industrialized these countries become, there are more commercial opportunities for China. And as a result of this, all these things will follow. People-to-people exchange, cultural exchanges, all these things will follow. We always say that economic relationship is always the ballast of a bilateral relationship. And we need that ballast between Africa and China.
Yeah, if implemented properly, more people can benefit from it. Thank you very much. Now, why don't we turn to our audience, because we have a few dozen college students here with us on set. They are college students from different parts of the world. I'm sure they have a lot of questions in mind, so let us know. Raise your hands if you have something to share with us or a question that you want to ask. Let us know. Earlier, yes, this young lady over there.
Thank you for this opportunity. And my name is Dai Yuwei, and I'm from Beijing Language and Culture University. And I have a question for Professor Gong. Last month, I met 2 delegates from Burundi, and they are really nice person, but they asked me a question. If China sells quality goods to the US and low-quality goods to some countries in the Belt and Road Initiative. So is there some kind of, double standards?
Good question, actually. It's not just happening to these less developed countries or Africa in general. I mean, it used to happen in China as well, as you know it, right? I remember about 10 years ago, there's a big discussion about why the stuff that are sold on the market, was substandard, different from the stuff exported to the North American market, European market, and there was a heated discussion about this. But we know that gradually this issue is gone now. Today, this kind of a products don't have a market anymore in China. Young people don't bother to pick up these things, right? There's a term during those days called "sanzai," knockout stuff. Remember that? 20 years ago in China, we have a lot of those sanzai handsets. These not so good handsets, selling on the market. Today, they don't have a market anymore. I think it's just a matter of economic development. Essentially, it's an economics issue. In other words, when you don't have the purchasing power to buy a high-quality product, the market will respond to come up with something. The supply side will respond by coming up with something that suits your purchasing power, that suits your preferences. Quality comes at a price. There's no doubt about it. But I think this issue will be a moot point probably in 10 years for these countries as their economy develops, as their consumers start to develop a more refined taste for better products, things will change. It's not like China sellers or companies in China are deliberately selling a substandard product. It's a response to the market. And I sure hope that that process can be accelerated and things can happen much faster. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, who else? Okay, yes, please.
Thank you. My concern is also about, like, in terms of education, like what are the prevent solution for example, like making up like some communities, young communities, so that as young generation we can get imprinted more about the new technology and learn more about like how to get that knowledge, and also for different like different region of the world, because I feel like there's still places where people still need like still doesn't know more about the new technology. So I would like to ask, is there my question is about all the professor, like, is there any platform where people can get maybe opportunities to go study, for example, scholarship, or I don't know, any kind of opportunities to go in other place to imprint themselves with the knowledge of new technology? Thank you.
Well, I think there's a myth out there that says that if you're from Africa, I guess people from Africa are not so good at math or STEM, which is called STEM in general: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think people in Africa should really step up and totally defeat this kind of a myth. And I think what China can do is to help African countries to incentivize more students getting to STEM fields, to be engineers, to be mathematicians. If we're talking about manufacturing, we're talking about industrialization, we're talking about catching up with the West or even China in terms of technology, in terms of the latest emerging new scientific concepts. You need an engineering base of labor force. So I think more students should get into these fields. And in that regard, I think China is actually doing something like that. I mean, we here in China, universities accept a lot of African students, providing scholarships and train people into these fields. And I think African side should also devote more resources to encourage young people to get into this. The gap between the African world and the most advanced, technologically advanced part of the world is not going to be closed if we're just talking about capacity building, and we're talking about politics, we talk about humanities all the time. At the end of the day, we need engineers to solve the world's problem, solve the problems in Africa. So I think this is very important. STEM, that's the word. STEM, go for it, STEM. There's a movie in the 1970s, right? Graduates, Dustin Hoffman asked for career advice, and his I think his uncle tell him plastics. So plastics was very popular in the 1970s. Today, for African students, my answer is STEM. That get into STEM.
All right, thank you, Professor. And I want to thank all of our audience members for listening, thinking, and brainstorming with us today. And although we've gone about producing this special program in segments highlighting regional achievements, we do want to end on a more global perspective here with some final thoughts from our guests. Harvey, this one for you. You study China and its relations to globalization. Looking forward, the anti-globalization forces that dominated much of the past decade, will they deteriorate in the coming decade? Will they dissipate in the coming decade? And what will be their relations with the Belt and Road initiative's success or failure?
Well, to me, globalization is a fait accompli. It's not going away. We're not going to deglobalize. And so we're going to continue with globalization, and we're going to continue after the next couple of years in more full speed ahead. And I believe if we do that, there'll be more sharing of information, more trade, more cooperation, more multi-paths for everybody. But this idea about de-risking, I think this is a false thing. I think this is a point that's very close to decoupling. We're not going to have that. We've gone too far. And I believe that the future world will be one that's interconnected and where we can all benefit, and we are going to have a community of shared future for all mankind.
You know, 10 years is a very important, remarkable milestone. But Zun, going forward, how would you look at the role of the BRI in shaping global geopolitical landscape?
I think I do completely resonate with what Harvey just said as well. You know, moving forward, we are moving towards a world where the 80% matter much more. And as we can clearly see 10 years on, the Belt and Road Initiative has an inertia by now. It has an inertia because it truly resonates with the priorities of people along the global south and that represent a majority of the world. So moving forward, I think we will learn better ways to take more ownership of our development. We will have more platforms in more diverse parts of the world. Of course, in China we have so many, but in many other parts of the world, for different cultures, different civilizations to connect and learn from each other. And I think I have a very optimistic feeling about the future because really this generation, younger people have exposure. They are learning from history. They are learning from different perspectives. So we should just keep moving forward with the resolve that we have today.
Yeah, keep moving forward. All right, I guess that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for sharing your analysis and perspectives with us. And thank you guys for staying with us the whole time. And that's going to do it for this special program on the Belt and Road Initiative.
And as we mark its 10th anniversary, CGTN will bring you more stories and perspectives on the project. Do stay with us. I'm Zhong Shi.
And I'm Li Qiuyan. On behalf of the whole team here, thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.